Today I'll be showing you the 5 best weapons to use in Tarkov's hardcore wipe at level 1 traders, which is all you can get access to at the moment, as level 2 is currently locked. And I want to start with something that I actually just discovered today, looking through all the different things that you're able to do at level 1 traders, and with a few extra little bits as well, like workbench. And this is to do with the KLIN and the KLIN. Now there's lots of people who really like the KLIN and the KLIN. They're very good for face tapping and they've got very low recoil. And so they're pretty good for dealing with people at low gear levels because no one's wearing any of the stupid visors or anything like that. But one of my issues with it is that you do actually have to be on point with those head taps, and the ammo for the KLIN really sucks, which is the only one that you can buy at level 1. The other two, the KLIN, needs 2 MP133 shotguns, which is about 68k. You can buy them on Jaeger, but that's quite expensive. And the KLIN, which is the suppressed one, is for 3 of these window cleaners, which is a little bit annoying to get. So there's a little trick that I want to show you, and you do need workbench 1 for this, as well as Jaeger. But what we're going to do is, the way to avoid the ammo sucking in the KLIN and the KLIN is if you go into the hideout, you could go to workbench 1, and you will notice that you are able to make PMM PSTM. This one has 58 damage and 24 pen, which is actually significantly better than pretty much everything else you could buy off the traders straight away. So you do need to get to workbench level 1. That means 4 nuts, 4 bolts, and 2 multi-tools, which you can buy off a mechanic, and then you're able to craft this here. Well, how do you get the kite gunpowder, I hear you saying? Well, fortunately, you can actually get the kite gunpowder from workbench level 1, and you need to get HP ammo to build it. Where do you get the HP ammo from, I hear you ask? Well, you can get that from Jaeger, and 120 only costs 8,760, and that's going to then get you 2 of these kites, which you can then turn into the ammo that you want. Now, the second issue here is that the PMM PSTM cartridge, if you see down there, it's basically an overpressure round, and so it doesn't work in the KLIN, which initially looks like a really big problem because it's the only one that we can buy. We can't actually buy the KLIN because it's on barter only. However, there is another craft in here. If you look up the KLIN in the workbench, you can make a KLIN with a KLIN in the workbench itself. You do need one of these tools, so you need to find an auxiliary set of tools, which I actually don't have myself, but if you do have one of these, obviously keep it, because you probably will just be keeping everything at the moment, and then you can actually turn a KLIN into a KLIN. Now, one extra interesting thing about this is that you can't buy the 30 round magazines outside of doing this barter for the round pliers with Prepor, which is another thing that's slightly annoying. However, using this craft, you can buy a KLIN and you can take off the magazine you get with it, which is the 30 rounder, and then when you do the craft to make the KLIN, you then get another one, because you're basically just going to fabricate a magazine out of thin air, which is quite handy. So this way, you're able to make a KLIN through the workbench and craft ammo for it that's 24 pen. I think that's pretty fun and a bit of a cheeky way to get around some of the restrictions and run a gun with pretty low recoil that is also going to go through the class 2 armor on the throat protection around a lot of the armor vests that people are going to be wearing, and obviously it also is very good against people's faces, even if they're wearing glasses or basic helmets, that kind of thing. Now, if you don't have access to all of that stuff, then don't worry. So the first one that I do think is the more general purpose SMG is the PP19. The one thing that you've probably noticed as you've gone through all of this wipe so far, if you've looked through any of the traders, is that the stuff is really, really expensive. 62,499 rubles for the 9A91. You've got AKs going up to 54k. The SKS itself is even 45,000 as well. So the traders are really, really pricey. So to be able to buy the PP19 at a mere 32,000 rubles is actually pretty nice. You also have some modding options as well. If you build the workbench, you can also do edit build, which is really, really useful. I think the workbench should be a huge priority. And now, because of the quality of life update that BSG put through on parts, you can see which parts you can put on. And the beauty of the PP19 is that it has a dovetail mount, and onto this you can put all sorts of different optics. Now, one that I think is actually kind of underrated and is one of the cheapest is this one, the Obzor. It genuinely doesn't look that bad. It's a pretty decent one, and as I said, it's one of the cheapest ones that you can get. So this makes the PP19 very, very, very inexpensive to run. So it's 11,000 rubles on top of the base price of the PP19. And this is basically as cheap as you're going to get away with on a weapon in this day and age. In the hardcore wipe, you can also buy 30 round magazines straight off the bat from Prepor 2, which is really, really handy. And you've probably got quite a lot of ammo for this anyway, that came with your M9 pistols or your Grachs or whatever if you're bear. So you're either going to have a lot of M882, like you can see in my stash, I've got loads of M882 up here, which is 18 pence, it's not that bad. And PST, you get a lot of that if you are bear, which is in fact even slightly better at 20 pence. So the PP19 is honestly a solid choice. Now there's obviously other weapons in this category that you could go for. Some people like the PPSH. The beauty of the PPSH is that you can put a drum magazine on it, and that one is available at level 1. This does make it 66k or something, so it is a bit expensive, but the drum magazine is pretty funny, and it's really good for leg meta. I find that because you can't add any sights or anything onto the PPSH, I do find it a bit harder to use and get those head taps that you kind of need with the ammo that doesn't have very good penetration, like 9x19 or 7.62x25. The ammo for the PPSH really isn't very good. So you kind of have to sort of spray and pray with this gun a little bit more, but it is quite good for leg meta if you want to do that. Another option is over on Peacekeeper. Now, unfortunately, Peacekeeper is really expensive. You can't buy dollars directly from Peacekeeper either, so you have to sell stuff to him to try to basically build up your stash of dollars if you want to do this. And you can kind of work out what the rate is going to be if you go and look at what a weapon would cost to sell to him, 134 versus mechanic, and it comes to about 145 at the moment. So that's basically your effective conversion rate, and that makes a lot of these guns really pricey. I mean, look at the AUG, for example. I know it's not an SMG, but that's like 140,000 rubles equivalent. It's just not really worth buying. The UMP does end up working out because it's a barter, and a lot of the barters are actually quite good because all the ruble values are super inflated from the traders. And one of the reasons for this is that you can go and buy the bayonets from Fence. You've been able to do this for a while. Let's go on to Fence, go into the melee weapons section. You can go and buy these for 33k, and then you can go and buy the Damascus knife for 7k. So again, that does end up being about 60k, so it is a lot more than the PP19. But one advantage that you have with the UMP is that you can buy laser match straight off the bat, which is 76 damage and 19 pen. So it's a lot better than 9x19. This is only 54 damage for 20 pen. So you get a lot more damage with UMP, albeit with a slower fire rate. But I still think that the PP19 is probably the best in this category for SMGs. So weapon number 2, we need to look at a general purpose assault rifle. Now, as I said before, a lot of this wipe is going to depend on what ammo you pick up. So if you find, for example, some SP6, then it means the 9A9 one is probably going to be quite good. If you find 7.62 BP, then you might want to use the SKS. So it does depend on what you find. But if you don't have anything and you're just kind of starting from scratch, I still think that the AKS-74U is probably the easiest, cheapest way to just get started with a full auto weapon. It's also not that expensive compared to all the others. 37,000 rubles is honestly not bad. And one of the great things about this is you can put on a little optic very easily from level 1 traders. The B18 mount, which comes from Mechanic, that's this guy here. And on top of that, you can then put one of these optics. The PK06 is the cheapest. This is about 11.5k, but you do have some other options too. You have the MRS. Unfortunately, again, like we said before with Peacekeeper, his optics are really pricey. So if you go and have a look at the H2, for example, which is one that you are allowed to buy, this is $300, which is basically like 45,000 rubles, like more than the gun. So I would probably avoid those. And one good way to go and look at what your options are is actually just to go onto the flea market interface and go into either collimators or compact collimators, and you can look through and see what the options are, see which ones are the cheapest. So as I said, the PK06 is really cheap. Most of these other ones are really expensive from Peacekeeper, including the Burris Fastfire, so probably wouldn't use those. Some of these ones are dovetail only, like the Obzor. As I said, I quite like the Obzor, but it's dovetail only. Don't be tempted to use the PK8A, because that one's got really thick surround. I don't think it's worth the decrease in price for that. Or you could go for something like the Axion Cobra. Now, when you're looking at Picatinny rails, the Cobra that fits those is at 20,000 rubles, which is a little bit unfortunate because it is quite expensive. Or you could buy something like the Walther MRS. But if you want to just go with something nice and cheap, then just go with the PK06 and just kind of have done with it. You can build your gun out very easily like that, and it's very inexpensive. Theoretically speaking, you can put on a handguard if you want. B11, you can put on a foregrip, VFG, you could put on a laser at the side, TBL, that gives you a laser. You can also alternatively put on a flashlight. The ones that you get straight away are pretty pricey actually. So the best flashlight I think is probably the 25mm ring, and then this guy, the Ultrafire flashlight. So you can put that on instead. The only thing I would say about this is that the flashlights that go inside the rings, they don't give you any point fire bonus, so it is a bit unfortunate. You do obviously get the flashlight effect and you can blind people and whatnot, but you don't get any point fire bonus for having it on like you would with a flashlight that connects directly to the handguard or with a laser. So just bear that in mind. But I don't think that all these mods are actually really worth it, especially with the increase in price of all of this stuff at the moment. The alternative routes to go about this kind of thing is if you use the Pilgrim instead. This comes from Skier. This means that you can then put on a different type of sight on top. I don't think this is really necessary. It's more expensive doing it this way. I think I'd rather just have the B11, but if you do want it closer to your face for some reason, then you can put that on instead. It means the PK06 is slightly closer to the screen. I think the B11 is just fine. And then alternatively, you've got these versions as well. You've got the AKS-74UN. If you do really like the Obzor or one of the other optics you've got, like the EKP to put on, you can put that on the dovetail mount. That's what the N means. It means it's got a dovetail, whereas the other one that we looked at doesn't. This does end up being more expensive than doing it with the regular 74U, because the dovetail mount means that you're going to spend a little bit more. It jumps the price up quite a bit from 37k to 54k. So it just depends if you've got an optic that you want to use on that particular weapon that you can't use on this. But I think those situations are pretty limited. Now, the main reason why you would want to go for one of these guns in the first place is a bit like what I said in my wipe strategy video, is that yes, you can only buy some basic ammo to start with, and US is probably the best one that you can get. 17 pen with 65 damage, which isn't actually that bad, but you get minus 15 recoil, which does make a difference at the start of the wipe. But you can get these other ammos in raid, and this is the reason why these guns end up being really good, because as you wander around the map, you're going to be finding various things. I've got here BP, PP, PS, and these are going from 28 pen, 34 pen, 45 pen, that kind of thing. And that will really help you against players who've got class 3 and class 4 armor on. As soon as you pick that stuff up in raid, you can put it immediately into your gun, so you get instant upgrade, and that will just make you so much more formidable against your opponents in raid. On that note, if you're looking for a more ranged oriented rifle, the SKS is not a bad one to pick. There is a little trick, if you do like the SKS, there is a little trick to this to be able to put on a optic straight away, which is this, the SKS Tapco railed gas tube cover. This is a relatively new part, so a lot of people, because they just tend not to faff about with the basic SKS, a lot of people don't realize that this is in the game. And when you put this on, this then allows you to put on something like we were looking at before, like the MRS at the front. I don't like red dots going on the front of my guns, so I probably will choose something else, but this is an option if you really want to cheap out and you have some decent 7.62. The other better alternative, obviously, is to go for Jaeger's version. You do need to get Jaeger. And then on his OP SKS version, you then add this thing, the dovetail mount from him, which then you can put on all the other stuff that we talked about before, EKPs and whatnot. If you do put it on the EKP, by the way, always remember to get the Cobra Sight Shade. This adds 3 ergonomics. The EKP itself takes off 3 ergonomics, so this actually makes it ergo neutral, which is kind of nice. And as far as the SKS goes, at this point, I probably would just leave it. You can pimp this thing out if you really want to. So you can change the SKS wood over to the Tapco Intrafuse chassis. You can then change the pistol grip to the SAW SKS pistol grip. You can change the buffer tube over to the SKS Tapco Intrafuse buffer tube. Onto that, you can add this, which is going to be expensive from Peacekeeper, but you can get the M4SS stock from him. You can then technically get a Tapco Intrafuse rail, and onto that, you could put vertical foregrip. And this gets you to 73 ergo and 105 vertical recoil. I don't think this is really worth doing, because this makes the gun horrendously expensive. If we go and actually try and build this thing, have a look at the parts, it is going to be crazy how expensive this gun is. We obviously don't need that. There's a few parts you won't need for this. It's still well over 100,000 rubles, which I think is probably a mistake in this wipe, given how hard it is to make money. One good thing about the SKS is that you do get the option to use the PSO. The PSO can be bought from Prapor for 20,000 rubles, and this means that you can actually engage in some ranged combat, which a lot of people are just not really expecting at this point in the wipe. Most people are thinking about going close up, but you can engage targets from a decent distance with the PSO. So this is one interesting option if you do have some good ammo for this. Now, just before we jump onto the ammo, let's talk about the magazines. Unfortunately, you can only go from the integral 10 round mag to the 20. There's not another smaller version that you can kind of swap between them, and you can still top load with this thing in, but the issue is that because they're on Peacekeeper, they're really expensive again. These things used to be about 10k a pop, and now they're more like 20,000 rubles. So if you do want to use the SKS and you do want to use the 20 round mag, which I would suggest if you can, then try to find a chainlet, because chainlets are not really used for that much else. There's a few other barters that you could do later with them, but this then means that you can get 20 round magazine. So try to keep a chainlet to go and barter for that. That'll save you about 20,000 rubles, equivalent's worth in dollars if you do want to use it with the SKS. So I do probably like the SKS the most. I probably wouldn't mod it, but it's good because it gives you a wide range of optics to fit with it. If you don't like the SKS for whatever reason, you can use the VPO 136 instead. This takes the same bullets. This is a 7.62x39 gun, so if you do have some good rounds for it, you can go for this instead. And this mods out like a regular AK. Remove the iron sight, you put on the Bastion, and then you can put on any sight that you like, anything that you've got just lying around. And the advantage of this is that you can get relatively cheap 20 round magazines, because these are only 4,000 rubles, and it's just a little bit less clunky to use in certain situations than the SKS itself, although this is going to be a little bit more money. And obviously you don't have a dovetail here, so you're stuck with anything that kind of mounts on the top. Ammo wise, the best that you can actually buy at the beginning is SP. This is 20 penetration and comes from Skier, but once you've gone around in raid a little bit, you probably will find some better stuff. PS is really what you're looking for. This has 35 pen and is actually really strong. The next best alternative is T45M, which is 30 pen. It's also pretty good, but it might struggle a little bit with class 4. And failing that, FMJ is actually not that bad either, which is pretty plentiful on scavs, and that comes with 26 pen, which is again better than anything you can buy over on the traders. So look out for these, and you can use these in either the SKS, which is my preference, or something like the VPO 136, which I think works a little bit better for maybe close range fighting. Okay, next let's look at the shotguns. Shotguns are pretty powerful. I've actually been killed by shotguns a few times, and that's because people aren't getting their armor back all the time, and so not everyone is wearing class 4. Now, you're pretty limited without Jaeger. The only one that you can get access to is the 590A1 Mossberg on Peacekeeper, and I wouldn't suggest buying that. And even when you get onto Jaeger, you can't buy something like the 153 or the Saiga 12. You can't get anything that is properly semi-automatic. So really the choice that we have is between the revolver shotgun, which is 29,000 rubles, nice and cheap. You get 5 shots in here. This is kind of semi-automatic because you can change the mode over into the second mode where it's slightly less accurate, but it does rechamber after every shot, or the MP133, which I would say is slightly easier to use, but the rate of fire is a little bit lower. Now, a cool thing about the MP133, and the reason why I quite like the MP153, is that you can get a target ring on the top. This already comes with the 6 shell magazines. You don't need to upgrade that, which is quite good. And what you want to do is, rather than putting on this SPRM mount, which you can do if you want, it depends on what optic you want. If you do want to have an MRS or a PK06 or something, you can use the SPRM mount there. But what I would do is go into the barrel, and I would swap this over for one of the other ones that's got a rib. You can choose either the 710, 750, or the 660. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. 660 is probably going to be the cheapest one and the shortest one. Doesn't matter that much to the recoil. But this rib allows you to then add this, which is the target ring. And this is the one that I usually use on the 153 when I'm using buckshot, and I really like it. I think it's much nicer than using any of the other sights. It's got a little ring on there so you can just kind of blast away, and this makes ADSing really nice. In theory, you can also add the 133 rails and add a vertical foregrip if you want to. I don't really care to do this, to be honest. This is the Gunsmith Part 1 type modding that you can do if you want to, but I don't think it's really worth it. And from there, you just basically have to decide what ammo you're going to use. With this target ring, you're probably going to be using buckshot. Just go on a link search and see what we've got available to us. 7mm is just fine. Technically speaking, 525 reaches out a little tiny bit further with headshots, but really it's by the by, so you can just put 7mm on there and be okay. Outside of this, if you do want to use a slug, and I have actually been killed by a slug this wipe, if someone's wearing a packer, they can just one-shot you. The Palaver 3s are probably the best ones from Jaeger, because these have got 17 pen, so there is like a 50-50 chance that they'll just one-shot you straight through your level 2 armor, because they have 140 damage, which is pretty crazy. There's a few other options as well. You've got lead slugs with 15, you've got grizzly slugs with 12 pen, that kind of thing. Doesn't really make a difference what you choose. It's the reason why I've gone for the one with the highest pen. You get a little bit of recoil reduction too with the Palavers, and that's one extra reason that you might want to use it. But I typically would stick to buckshot, and the good thing about buckshot is that it gives you the option to shoot both at the face. You can just spray at the face area and hope that you catch them. Or alternatively, if they do look really geared, they come around the corner with, I don't know, one of Rashala's guards' helmets on or something, you can swap to the legs and just blast their legs off, because you can kill people in 3 shots with these cartridges, basically. So you got 39 damage times by 8, and yes, there is diminished damage through the legs, but in 3 shots, you're going to just clear them completely out. So these are really powerful. Also, I would say that leg meta, I hadn't thought about this up until when I was playing yesterday, but leg meta is really strong now. Because you can't buy painkillers off the fleet at the moment, and the only one you can get is the Analgeans, people are just not running painkillers. So if you blast them in the leg one time with these shotguns, you're quite likely to take them out and black them. That makes it really hard for them to go and fight you. They basically either need to move really slowly to try to make it harder for you to shoot them, or they have to sit still so that they can steady their gun. It makes it a really difficult thing for your opponent to actually figure out what to do if they're not running those painkillers. So this can actually be quite good and can work really nicely. The final weapon that I want to talk about is the VPO-209, and the reason why I want to talk about this is it is the only sensible rifle that you can actually use with a suppressor at level 1 traders without finding one in raid. This does make it really expensive, so I will caveat this with that, but you can get the R43 366 TKM suppressor from Skia right off the bat. It does cost 78,000 rubles, but if you find yourself a nice little scope and you want to use something as a sort of semi-DMR, you can then put a Bastion on and use it here. So it depends on what you find. I mean, I found one of these, for example, these ADO P4s, and you could potentially kit this out if you do want to do some longer range combat without being heard. You can use this weapon to do that if you have a bit of extra money. One other good thing about this is that you can buy some of the good bullets straight away. The best one that you could put into this right now is FMJ. This one has 23 penetration, so it's not that bad for a bullet that you can buy directly from the trader. But you're going to want to pick up some EKO instead if you can. This is at level 2, so you can't buy that straight off the bat. But try to find some scavs that they've got EKO if you want to use this one. But yeah, this is basically your only real option if you want to go suppressed and be shooting at long distances, outside of the VPO-215, which is a bolt action. So between those two guns, you've got an option to go suppress if you want to, if you haven't found any, and you really need to snipe some scavs on woods, for example. This is potentially something you could think about using. As I said at the beginning though, what you use is really going to depend on what you pick up. And at the beginning of the wipe, as a USEC, I use my M4s quite a bit because M855 is really good. 31 penetration is way better than anything you can get on the traders, and this will actually kill people. It would be tempting maybe to go for an 8R, but at 73k, I just don't think it's really worth it, especially given that it's difficult to get the new gas block without doing gunsmith and all that stuff. It's actually a bit better now that the tasks have come out, but this is still a little bit pricey in my mind to suddenly switch over to a semi-auto weapon. But there's just so many options depending on what ammo you pick up. You could even go and grab a Mosin if you want to. It's not really my playstyle, but these bullets, even SPBT with 31 penetration, are pretty decent. You're limited to HP if you are just buying from the traders, but lots of scavs will have Mosins, especially sniper scavs, and you can find LPS or T46M, that kind of thing, on them if you want to. So make sure that you're picking up all the ammo as you go around in your raids, then match that to the various weapons, and if you're stuck, go back to my list and you can start with those based on the traders to restart your runs. So next, if you haven't checked out my rundown of all of the hidden changes, then go and check that out, which I did yesterday. Otherwise, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.